Today we talk trash, disease, and lack of water after the grid goes down. I'll present you with a scenario and you can tell me how you'd get through it. You don't see this much in popular television shows like The Walking Dead, but an enemy just as dangerous as zombies or raiders for a post-collapse world are the things that lurk and breed in your toilets, backyard, or foul pond you turn to in desperation. And the way you could suffer might have you wishing for a quick death. When running water is stopped and trash lies all around, will you be ready for the apocalypse? Hello, fellow mutants. Sanitation would normally be a very boring topic for a video, but I like to wargame things and will place myself, along with you, into a powerful what-if scenario to get the mind and senses going. This time we'll be in the shoes of someone living in a suburb in a post-societal collapse. A real nail-biter and horrific scenario, even if it doesn't happen with a flash and a bang of Hollywood action. Of course, after you hear where we're going, you'll probably want to stop biting your nails. Nasty stuff. So imagine this. It's a week or so after a war or some other catastrophic event. Your family was out of town visiting relatives and you're all alone. They were supposed to have been back days ago. You don't want to leave to search for them in case they're on their way back. Electricity and cell towers are out. Smartphones are useless except as calculators and flashlights. Most communications went down so suddenly that no one really knows the cause of it or when it might end. A few people who were smart enough to have shortwave radios with battery power tell of a massive war, but others say it's an elaborate attack on infrastructure, water, electricity, fuel. Whatever the cause, with the exception of a temporary return to power within the first couple of hours of the event, your town and surroundings have gone dark, with the nights that are eerily quiet, punctuated only by distant screams, gunfire, and occasional explosions. For the most part, you stay home behind bolted doors. You have an emergency solar setup close to the door to your backyard, but it's only enough to power small appliances and devices for communications, and the solar panel is not big enough to fully recharge the battery each day. Your cheap Harbor Freight generator ran out of fuel the day before yesterday, and the gas station closest to you has been ransacked. Most of your refrigerated food is spoiled. Running water is out. You filled a bathtub and had some emergency water stocked, but you've run through most of it. Your neighbors have already come knocking to see if you can spare anything, but you tell them you also have none. They shuffle off despondently, sharing their hope for some word of a local or FEMA government truck rumored to have been seen in the area with water. But those are just rumors. The truth is that any efforts to distribute water were overrun by looting and theft before they ever got far, and the streets outside of the relative safety of your subdivision have become places of death, chaos, and desperation. The sounds of gunshots have become ever more frequent, replacing the once common noise of passing vehicles. Few people still drive in your area, and when they do, they often become targets, especially if visibly loaded up with supplies. Whatever the reason, you made the call to bug in. You thought a couple of buckets of ReadyWise freeze-dried food and a case of water bottles would see you through a couple of weeks of uncertainty, but you now estimate the water you plan to cook with will instead be used up quickly as drinking water. You have a few cans of beanie weenie and corned beef hash left in the pantry, but most of the things you might cook with also need water, milk, or eggs. You used all 3 toilets in your house until you could no longer flush. The smell is permeating the home and you've opened the second-story windows to circulate air. You dug a latrine pit in the backyard and another pit for trash. The street outside is thick with the stench of your neighbor's trash, too. Some of the bags have been ripped open by people more desperate than you've been so far, looking for any scraps of food. Perhaps worst of all, however, is your health. You feel nauseous and weak. You've been outside to your latrine pit 3 times in the past hour, with diarrhea, and you know you're losing water that you can't afford to replenish. You used the last roll of toilet paper you stocked up on years ago. You were sure you had more. You're baffled at how you may have gotten sick. You've had little contact with anyone since the grid down event started. On second thought, maybe you shook a hand or two in the first 24 hours from friendly neighbors, and you did accept that casserole a few days ago from a too optimistic mom next door, but you doubt that you picked anything contagious up. You did fill your Berkey water filter with some water from a pond on the outskirts of the subdivision, but that thing's supposed to filter out the bad stuff, right? Whatever the cause, the sharp pains and cramps in your belly tell you something's definitely wrong. You eye the vehicle in your garage. You have a half tank of fuel. Not enough to get up to your relative's house even if you changed your mind, since they live close to a city about 6 hours' drive to the north. You imagine the situation is even worse there and on the way, but you can't help but worry for the safety of your family. What would you do in this scenario? Please let us know. Would you be better prepared? I'll provide a little background to help your plans. In this scenario, where an individual runs low on water and handles fecal waste improperly, the most likely diseases to be contracted would be waterborne illnesses caused by fecal-oral transmission. Specifically, diseases caused by bacteria, virus, or parasites that are commonly found in fecal matter and can contaminate water sources or their surrounding environment would pose the highest risk. Some of the top most likely diseases to consider in this situation would be cholera. Cholera is a severe bacterial infection caused by the ingestion of water or food contaminated with the bacterium Vibrio cholerae. It can lead to diarrhea and dehydration, and in severe cases is life-threatening. Typhoid fever. It's caused by the bacterium Salmonella enterica serotype typhi. It spreads through contaminated food or water and can cause high fever, abdominal pain, and gastrointestinal symptoms. Hepatitis A is a viral infection that infects the liver. It's primarily transmitted through the fecal-oral route and often due to inadequate sanitation or contaminated water or food. It can cause symptoms like fever, fatigue, jaundice, and digestive issues. And then there's E. coli and giardiasis, which is caused by the parasite Giardia lamblia. Also causes diarrhea, as of course everyone's familiar with E. coli does. As you may have noticed, there are a lot of possible causes for diarrhea here, and the list doesn't even include spoiled foods. Another one, let's say the actual culprit in the story, is Cryptosporidium. Probably picked up in the fouled pond the person here used to fill his Berkey water filter with. A place where other neighbors, shorter of water, also used to wash up without your knowledge. This is a parasitic protozoan that can cause a diarrheal illness called cryptosporidiosis. In a post-apocalyptic scenario with limited access to clean water and sanitation, the person could potentially contract Cryptosporidium through the following ways. Contaminated water sources. It's found in water sources that have been contaminated with fecal matter. If the person consumes water from untreated or contaminated sources, they could become infected with a parasite. You could also get this on your hands when you're filling up the Berkey water filter. Improperly washed food. If food items like fruits and vegetables are washed or rinsed with contaminated water, the Cryptosporidium parasite may be present and can be ingested. And there's poor personal hygiene. The person fails to maintain proper hygiene, such as not washing hands after using the restroom or handling food, they can transfer Cryptosporidium from contaminated surfaces to their mouth, leading to infection. The symptoms of cryptosporidiosis appear within 2 to 10 days, and the common symptoms include diarrhea, abdominal cramps, and nausea and vomiting. In a scenario with no available medical care, the prognosis of cryptosporidiosis can be challenging. Generally, the infection tends to be self-limiting, meaning it resolves on its own. However, without medical intervention, there's an increased risk of complications and prolonged symptoms. The best thing to do would be to focus on supportive care and preventing dehydration, drinking clean, safe water to avoid further contamination. A lot of preppers recommend stocking amoxicillin, often through commercially available fish mox. However, Cryptosporidium is a parasite, not a bacteria, and amoxicillin would not be effective against it. If it were me, I'd use the last of the water to fight off the infection, then use the truck to search out a source of cleaner water than the fouled pond nearby. But if you've been watching my videos for a while now, you'd be right to assume I probably would have bugged out to prepared land much earlier. Having a plan when your family is split up to meet at bug-out property would avoid the situation in this story where you're sitting around hoping for your family to return. And as far as the home goes, a lot could be said about the sanitation of the house and if you should even stay or return there, with supplies dwindling and waste piling up. Speaking of sanitation, what about all those leftover COVID-19 supplies that either you may have or are going for extra cheap now at the dollar store and clearance shelves? While I don't have a lot of confidence in using such supplies against an airborne infection again, they certainly could be useful to keep you from getting sick from the scenario I described. Even people with an iron stomach who scoff at gloves and hand sanitizer aren't likely to, say, want to bare-hand the hose to a black water tank from an RV. And that's the kind of filth you'll have to deal with in a true SHTF situation where you stay in one place for a long time. The leftover COVID supplies could be put to some good use with sanitary waste disposal in a few different ways. Hand sanitizers, for example, those are obvious, right? You can use those when running water is not available, especially if they contain at least 60% alcohol. Disinfecting wipes are an obvious one as well, and they can be used to clean surfaces, but you want to watch the supply since you're probably limited on how many of those you have. Masks, gloves, and protective clothing can provide an actually useful barrier between individuals and hazardous SHTF substances. While they may not directly assist with waste disposal, they can protect against contamination during cleanup efforts or when handling the waste. Those N95 masks could be used if the stench is overpowering, since those surgical masks won't help much with smells. Cleaning supplies, such as soap, bleach, and alternative disinfectants, could be utilized for general cleaning purposes. I don't know about you, but I picked up a bunch of that kind of stuff on clearance and use it around the home for cleanup, and I keep a little extra stocked up, just in case. First aid kits. You'll want to have this kind of thing in any case, but the first aid kits that were offered during the COVID days may contain basic medical supplies like bandages, antiseptics, and medications. While they may not directly help, again, with your waste disposal, you can use them for treating minor injuries, little cuts in the finger, and preventing infections. But I didn't want to close this video out without a little promised trash talk. So why is trash and waste management so important? In a post-apocalyptic scenario where waste management systems may be disrupted, it's important to adopt practices that minimize the attraction of rodents, flies, and disease. Waste pits are something you can make. A trash pit or a garbage pit. It's what it sounds like, a hole dug in the ground to serve as a receptacle for solid waste. In the scenario I outlined earlier, one could be dug in the backyard or designated area away from water sources such as wells, creeks, or ponds. A few things you want to think about when you construct a waste pit. These include pit size and depth. A depth of around 3 to 4 feet is usually sufficient, but it should be deep enough to allow for a few months of waste accumulation. Of course, in the scenario shared in this video, you should consider digging when it's cool outside so you don't lose water unnecessarily to excessive sweating. Waste compaction. As you fill the pit with waste, it's important to compact the garbage as much as possible to maximize the capacity of the pit. You can use a tool or your feet to compress the waste and create more space. However, given the situation, I'd stick with a tool so you don't bring things that will make you sick back into your home. You can Cover the waste with a layer of soil or other materials like ash after each disposal to help control odors and minimize pests. Rotation of waste pits. This is a possibility depending on the size of your backyard. The timing will depend on various factors such as the rate of waste accumulation and how much space you have. When one waste pit becomes nearly full, you can start using another pit while allowing the first one to decompose naturally over time. The duration between rotations could vary, but I'd wait for a considerable amount of decomposition to occur before reusing the same pit. And in the scenario I shared, that's likely longer than our hero survives or continues to live in the same home. Secure trash containers. Using sturdy and lidded containers to store your trash can help. Ensure that the lids are tightly sealed to prevent creepy crawlies from accessing the waste. If possible, use containers made of materials that are difficult for pests to chew through, such as metal or durable plastic. However, honestly, you're probably going to run out of these containers rather quickly in this scenario. You can also use pest deterrents, such as herbs with strong scents like mint, to help repel rodents and flies. Mint can grow like a weed with minimal watering depending on your location, and it's a nice addition to plain foods like emergency rice and beans. Of course, if you're going to go picking some in the backyard, just again make sure that your proximity to the waste isn't so close that you end up putting something you shouldn't into your food. Additionally, keeping the area surrounding the trash containers or the trash pit clean and free of additional piled debris can make it less appealing for pests to hide in. Open burning is another last option. While burning trash may seem like a good idea, it's important to not rely too much on burning in such a situation because it can be an indicator, especially if seen repeatedly, that someone is living in a spot and has enough waste to burn in the first place. In other words, it's like a beacon. It can also release harmful toxins depending on what you're burning if you have open windows, such as in my scenario here. Not to mention the fire safety risks, of course, when there are no fire trucks coming to save the day and no water hoses available to control the fire. Well, I hope this video has helped you consider the what-if scenarios I like to cover here on my channel. I know these videos aren't necessarily as popular as my precious metals discussions, but if you have any other suggestions for additional what-if videos, I'd like to hear them. Well, that's all I have for today on this. Until next time, it's Copper Mutant, signing out.